They say one wrong decision can destroy your entire life. I never believed that until the night I woke up in a strange room with my hands tied, staring into the cold eyes of the most dangerous man in the city. He thought I was someone else. He thought I had stolen from him, and because of that mistake, both our worlds were about to burn to ashes. My name is Minjae, and I have always lived a simple, quiet life. Every morning at 5, I wake up to the sound of birds outside my small apartment window. I stretch, wash my face with cold water, and head downstairs to my cafe. The cafe is nothing fancy, just a tiny corner shop with 6 tables, warm yellow lights, and the sweet smell of fresh bread filling the air. I named it Sunrise Bakery because I love how the morning sun shines through the glass windows and makes everything glow like gold. I bake cookies, cakes, and pastries for my neighbors. Mrs. Park comes every Tuesday for strawberry muffins. Mr. Lee stops by after his morning walk for black coffee and a croissant. The children from the elementary school press their noses against my window, watching me decorate cupcakes with colorful frosting. This is my life. This is my happiness. I never wanted anything more than this peaceful routine. But I should have known that peace never lasts forever. My twin brother Subin is completely different from me. While I spend my days covered in flour and sugar, he spends his time staring at computer screens in dark rooms. He's a genius with technology. He can break into any system, find hidden information, and solve problems that seem impossible. I always worried about the kind of people he worked for, but Subin never told me details. He would just smile and say, "Don't worry, Hyung, I know what I'm doing." I wish I had pushed harder to know the truth. 3 weeks ago, Subin visited me late at night. His face was pale and covered in sweat. His hands were shaking as he grabbed my shoulders and said, "Minjae, if anyone ever comes looking for me, tell them you don't know where I am. Promise me." I was so confused and scared, but I promised. Then he disappeared into the night, and I have not seen him since. I tried calling him every day, but his phone was always turned off. I went to his apartment, but it was empty. I asked his friends, but nobody knew anything. My heart was heavy with worry, but I had no idea how to find him. So I did the only thing I could do. I kept baking. I kept smiling at my customers. I kept pretending everything was normal, even though my chest felt tight with fear every single day. Then came that rainy Thursday evening. The sky was dark and heavy with storm clouds. Rain poured down like curtains of water, and the streets were empty. I was closing my cafe earlier than usual because no customers were coming in such terrible weather. I locked the front door, turned off the lights, and pulled my jacket hood over my head as I stepped outside. That is when everything changed. I heard footsteps behind me, fast and heavy. Before I could turn around, strong hands grabbed my arms. I tried to scream, but someone pressed a cloth against my mouth. The cloth smelled strange and chemical, making my head spin and my vision blur. I kicked and struggled with all my strength, but there were too many of them. 3 men in black clothes surrounded me like shadows. "Stop fighting. This will be easier if you cooperate," one of them said in a deep, emotionless voice. My heart pounded so hard I thought it would explode. Terror flooded through my entire body. Who were these people? What did they want from me? I tried to speak, to tell them they were making a mistake, but the cloth muffled all my words. My legs became weak and shaky. The world started spinning faster and faster until everything went black. When I woke up, my head felt like it was filled with heavy stones. My mouth was dry, and my wrists hurt. I realized my hands were tied behind my back with rough rope. I blinked several times, trying to focus my eyes. I was sitting in a chair inside a large, cold room. The walls were dark wood, and expensive paintings hung everywhere. A huge chandelier sparkled above me with hundreds of tiny crystals. Everything looked rich and fancy, but also scary and wrong.
Across the room, a man sat behind a massive desk. He was looking at papers and did not seem to notice I was awake. I could only see his silhouette against the window behind him, backlit by city lights far below. We were somewhere very high up, maybe in a tall building on a mountain. My throat was too dry to speak at first. I swallowed hard and whispered, "Please, where am I? Why am I here?" The man's head lifted slowly. He stood up and walked toward me with confident, powerful steps. As he came closer, I could finally see his face clearly. He was probably in his early 30s, with sharp, handsome features and cold, dark eyes that seemed to look right through me. His black suit was perfectly fitted, and his hair was styled back neatly. Everything about him screamed danger and power. This was Jong-in. I did not know his name yet, but I could feel that he was someone very important and very dangerous. He stopped just a few feet in front of me and crossed his arms over his chest. His expression was hard and unreadable, like a stone statue. "Kim Soo-bin," he said slowly, watching my face carefully.
My eyes went wide. "No, I'm not Subin. I'm his brother, Minjae. Please, you have to listen." "Quiet." His voice was like ice. "I don't have patience for lies. You stole classified information from my organization. Information worth millions. Information that could destroy everything I built over the past 10 years. Did you really think you could just take it and walk away without consequences?" My mind was racing in complete panic and confusion. Stolen information? Organization? What was he talking about? I shook my head desperately. "I don't know anything about stolen information. I run a small bakery. I make cookies and bread. I don't even know how to use computers properly. Please, you have the wrong person." Chung-jin's eyes narrowed with suspicion. He pulled out his phone and showed me a photograph. It was a picture of someone who looked exactly like me, standing outside a building and talking to men in dark suits. My heart dropped into my stomach. That was Subin, my twin brother. We looked so identical that even our own mother sometimes had trouble telling us apart when we were children. "This is you, meeting with members of the Dragon Syndicate 3 days ago," Chung-jin said coldly. "You sold them my financial records and security protocols. They paid you $2 million, and now you're going to tell me where you hid the backup files, or things will become very unpleasant for you." Tears started burning in my eyes. This was a nightmare. This could not be real. My gentle, smart brother had gotten involved with criminals. He had stolen from this terrifying man, and now I was paying the price because we looked the same? "That's my brother in the photo, not me!" I cried out, my voice breaking. "We're twins. We look identical, but I swear I'm not him. My name is Kim Minjae. I own Sunrise Bakery on Maple Street. You can check. You can ask anyone in my neighborhood. They all know me." Chung-jin stared at me for a long, silent moment. I could not read his expression. Was he considering my words, or was he just deciding how to punish me? Finally, he turned away and walked back to his desk. "Twins, how convenient," he said with bitter sarcasm. "I've heard every excuse imaginable, but this one is creative. Unfortunately for you, I didn't build my empire by being gullible." He pressed a button on his desk, and immediately 2 guards entered the room. They were both huge men with expressionless faces. "Take him to the East Wing," Jong-in ordered without looking at me. "Make sure he's comfortable but secured. No phone, no contact with the outside world. We'll continue this conversation tomorrow when he's ready to stop playing games." "No, please, please listen to me," I begged as the guards untied me from the chair and grabbed my arms. I tried to pull away, but they were too strong. "I'm telling the truth. I don't know anything about your files. Please just check my cafe. Talk to my customers. They'll tell you who I am." Jong-in did not respond. He sat back down at his desk and returned to his papers as if I did not exist. The guards dragged me out of the room, down a long hallway with marble floors and fancy decorations. Everything in this place looked expensive and cold, like a beautiful prison. They took me to a bedroom at the end of the hallway. It was actually quite nice, with a soft bed, clean bathroom, and a window showing the dark forest and mountains outside. But the door had a heavy lock, and I heard it click shut behind me with a sound that crushed my hope. I was trapped, completely and utterly trapped. Nobody knew where I was. Subin was missing and probably in terrible danger himself, and this man, this powerful, dangerous man named Jong-in, thought I was a criminal who had destroyed his life's work. I collapsed onto the bed and buried my face in the pillow, trying not to cry too loudly. How did my simple, peaceful life turn into this horror? How could I prove the truth when nobody would listen? And what would happen to me if I could not convince Jong-in that he had made a terrible mistake? Outside the window, rain continued to pour from the black sky. Thunder rumbled in the distance like the world itself was angry. I closed my eyes and prayed that somehow, some way, the truth would come to light before it was too late. But deep in my heart, I felt a cold fear settling in. I was in the hands of a man who controlled the criminal underworld, a man who had everything to lose, a man who would do anything to protect what he had built. And I looked exactly like the person who had betrayed him.
The first 3 days were the longest of my entire life. Every morning, a guard would bring me breakfast on a tray, scrambled eggs, toast, orange juice, and then leave without saying a single word. I tried talking to them, asking questions, begging them to listen to my story, but they never responded. It was like I did not exist as a human being to them. I was just a problem locked in a room. The bedroom itself was actually comfortable, almost luxurious. The bed had soft sheets that smelled like lavender. The bathroom had warm water and expensive soap. There were even books on a shelf if I wanted to read. But none of that mattered because I was a prisoner. The beautiful room was still a cage, and every time I looked at the locked door, my chest tightened with hopelessness. Jong-in came to visit me every afternoon. He would sit in the chair across from the bed, watching me with those cold, calculating eyes. He asked me the same questions over and over again. Where were the backup files? Who else had I shared the information with? What was my plan? And every single time, I gave him the same answer. I am not Subin. I don't know anything about files or information. Please, just let me prove who I am. But he never believed me. He thought I was acting, playing a role to confuse him. Sometimes I saw frustration flash across his face, like he was tired of this game. Other times he just looked at me with suspicion and disappointment, as if I was wasting his valuable time. On the 4th day, something shifted. It was a small change, barely noticeable, but I caught it. Jong-in came into the room like usual, but this time he was holding a first aid kit. I noticed his right hand was wrapped in a white bandage with spots of blood seeping through. My heart immediately filled with concern. Even though this man was keeping me prisoner, I could not help it. Taking care of people is just part of who I am. "You're hurt," I said softly, sitting up on the bed. "What happened to your hand?" Jong-in looked surprised by my question. His eyebrows raised slightly, and for the first time his expression was not completely cold and hard. He glanced down at his hand as if he had forgotten about the injury. Business meeting went badly. Someone disagreed with my terms and broke a glass. I was careless. I stood up slowly, making sure not to make any sudden movements that might alarm him. "Do you need help changing the bandage? It looks like it's bleeding through. If it gets infected, that could be really dangerous."
Jong-in stared at me for a long moment. I could see confusion in his eyes, like he could not understand why his prisoner was worried about his health. Criminals did not care about their captors. Thieves did not offer medical help to the people they betrayed. I could see the wheels turning in his mind,
trying to make sense of something that did not fit his expectations. "Why do you care?" he asked quietly. I shrugged, feeling embarrassed. "I don't know. I just do. I don't like seeing people hurt, even if they don't believe me." Something changed in Jong-in's face. The hard mask cracked just a little bit, revealing a flicker of uncertainty underneath. He slowly held out his injured hand toward me. I carefully unwrapped the bloody bandage. The cut was deep but clean, running across his palm. I cleaned it gently with antiseptic from the first aid kit, then wrapped it with fresh gauze, making sure it was snug but not too tight. "There," I said softly, finishing the knot. "Try to keep it dry and clean. Change the bandage twice a day." Jong-in looked down at his newly bandaged hand, then back up at me. "You're either the best actor I've ever met, or—" He did not finish the sentence, but I could hear the doubt creeping into his voice. After that day, our conversations changed. Jong-in still asked questions, but they were different now. Instead of interrogating me about stolen files, he asked about my life. What did I do at my bakery? What kind of pastries did I make? Why did I choose to become a baker? I told him everything honestly. I talked about how I learned to bake from my grandmother, who raised me in Subin after our parents died in a car accident when we were 8 years old. I described the joy I felt when customers smiled after tasting my strawberry cream cakes. I explained how I loved the early morning hours when the city was still quiet and I could knead dough in peaceful silence while watching the sunrise. Jong-in listened to every word. Sometimes he would ask follow-up questions. Sometimes he just sat there, watching my face as I spoke. I noticed he started staying longer each day, sometimes for an hour or more. He told me about his own life too, though he was more guarded with details. He grew up in poverty, he said. His father was violent and his mother left when he was young. He learned early that the world was cruel and only the strong survived. He built his organization from nothing, fighting and sacrificing everything to climb to the top. He had money, power, respect, and fear. But listening to him talk, I realized he did not actually sound happy. He sounded tired and lonely. "Don't you have friends?" I asked one evening. "People you can relax with and just be yourself?"
Jong-in laughed, but it was a bitter sound. "Friends are liabilities in my world. People who know your weaknesses are people who can destroy you. Trust is a luxury I can't afford." My heart ached for him. What a terrible way to live, always suspicious, always guarded, never able to truly connect with another human being. Despite everything he had done to me, I felt genuine sadness for this powerful man who had everything except the things that truly mattered. 2 weeks into my captivity, Jong-in made a decision that would change everything. He came into my room carrying my phone, which his people had taken from me the night they kidnapped me. He placed it on the table between us. "Make a call," he said simply. "Call this brother you claim to have. Let me listen. If you're telling the truth, I'll know." My hands were shaking as I picked up the phone. I had not spoken to anyone from my real life in 2 weeks. My heart was pounding with hope and fear as I scrolled through my contacts and pressed Subin's name. "Please answer," I prayed silently. "Please, please answer." The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. Then I heard my brother's voice, panicked and desperate. "Minjae? Hyung, is that you? Where are you? I've been losing my mind. I've searched everywhere. I called the police, but they said you just disappeared. Are you okay? Please tell me you're okay." Tears flooded down my face at the sound of his voice. "Subin, I'm alive. I'm not hurt. But there are people who think I'm you. They say you took something from them, something very important." There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end. "Oh no, oh no, no, no. Hyung, I'm so sorry. This is all my fault. I never meant for you to get involved. Where are you? Who has you?" Jong-in took the phone from my trembling hands.
His face had gone completely pale. All the blood had drained from his cheeks, and his eyes were wide with a horror I had never seen before. "This is Jong-in," he said into the phone, his voice tight and controlled. "You're Kim Soo-bin, the computer specialist who extracted my financial data?"
"Yes," Subin's voice came through, small and guilty. "And you have my brother, don't you? The baker who knows nothing about any of this. I'm the one you want. Let him go and take me instead." Jong-in closed his eyes. His jaw clenched so tight I could see the muscles working under his skin. "You're twins," he said, and it was not a question anymore. It was a statement of horrible, undeniable fact. "Identical twins," Subin confirmed. "We look so similar that even our grandmother sometimes called us by the wrong names. Please, he's innocent. He doesn't even know how to send an email properly. I'm the one who wronged you. Punish me, not him." Jong-in ended the call and just stood there, frozen, staring at the phone in his hand. The silence in the room was deafening. I watched as the reality of what he had done crashed over him like a tidal wave. His breathing became heavy and uneven. His hands started shaking. He started, then stopped. He tried again. "I kidnapped an innocent person." "Yes," I whispered. "I kept you prisoner for 2 weeks. I threatened you. I terrified you. You told me the truth from the very first moment, and I didn't believe you." "Yes." Jong-in sank down into the chair like his legs could not hold him up anymore. He buried his face in his hands. "What have I done?" he said, his voice breaking. "What kind of monster am I?" I did not know what to say. Part of me was angry, yes. Part of me wanted to scream at him for stealing 2 weeks of my life, for the nightmares I would probably have for years, for the fear that still lived in my chest. But another part of me, the soft part that had listened to his lonely stories and bandaged his wounded hand, felt sorry for him. He looked absolutely shattered. "I'll let you go immediately," he said, standing up abruptly. "I'll give you money, as much as you want, compensation for what I put you through. I'll have my people drive you anywhere you want to go. He was interrupted by a sudden, violent explosion that shook the entire building. The windows rattled, and the lights flickered. We both froze, staring at each other in shock. Then came the sound of gunfire. Pop, 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 rapid and close. Shouting voices echoed through the hallways. More explosions, these ones even closer. Jong-in's face transformed instantly from guilt to fierce alertness. He pulled out his phone and called someone. "Report, what's happening?" He listened for a few seconds, and his expression grew darker and darker. "How did they find this location? How many?" "I see. Fall back to the safe room. Protect the—" The call cut off abruptly. He grabbed my arm, not roughly, but urgently. "We need to leave, now. The Dragon Syndicate found us. They're attacking the compound." My mind could not process what was happening. The Dragon Syndicate? Those are the people Subin sold your information to? Yes, and now they're here to finish what they started. They want to destroy me completely and take over my territory. If they find you here, they'll kill you just for being associated with me. He pulled me toward the door. "I made the mistake of kidnapping you. I won't make the mistake of letting you die because of my failures." We ran through the hallways as chaos erupted around us. I could hear men shouting, guns firing, glass shattering. Jong-in held my hand tightly, pulling me through corridors and down staircases I had never seen before. He knew this building inside and out, every secret passage and hidden exit. We burst out through a back door into the cold night air. Rain was pouring down again, soaking us within seconds. Jong-in led me to a black car parked behind the trees.
He pushed me into the passenger seat and jumped into the driver's side. The engine roared to life, and we sped away down a muddy road as the building behind us lit up with flames and explosions. I looked back through the rear window. The entire compound was burning. Huge flames climbed into the dark sky, and thick smoke billowed out like angry storm clouds. Everything Jong-in had built, his headquarters, his control center, his symbol of power, was being destroyed. We drove for hours through winding mountain roads and empty highways. Jong-in did not speak. His hands gripped the steering wheel so tight his knuckles turned white. His jaw was set in a hard line, but I could see pain and devastation in his eyes. Finally, as dawn began to break over the horizon, we arrived at a tiny apartment in a neighborhood I did not recognize. It was old and run down, nothing like the luxury of his compound. Jong-in parked the car and sat there for a moment, just staring straight ahead. "This is a safe house," he said quietly. "Nobody knows about it. We can stay here until I figure out what to do next." We climbed the stairs to the 3rd floor and entered a small apartment with basic furniture and peeling wallpaper. It had 1 bedroom, a tiny kitchen, and a bathroom with a leaking faucet. Compared to where we just came from, it was like stepping into a completely different world.
Jong-in stood in the middle of the living room, looking lost and broken. "Everything is gone," he said, his voice hollow. "My organization, my people, my power. The Dragon Syndicate will take over my territory now. Everyone who worked for me will either join them or be eliminated. 10 years of building, of fighting, of sacrificing, destroyed in one night." I walked over to him slowly. "This happened because you kidnapped me," I said. It was not an accusation, just a statement of fact. "Yes," he agreed, his voice cracking. "If I had verified the target correctly, if I had listened to you instead of assuming you were lying, if I had been more careful, none of this would have happened. I made one mistake, and it cost me everything." He turned to look at me, and I saw tears in his eyes for the first time. This powerful, dangerous man was crying. "I'm sorry, Minjae. I'm so sorry for what I did to you. You didn't deserve any of this. And now, because of my mistake, because I dragged you into my world, you're in danger too. The Dragon Syndicate might come looking for you. Your entire life has been turned upside down because I was too arrogant and careless to check properly. I should have hated him. I should have run away the moment I had the chance. But standing there, looking at this broken man who had lost everything, I felt something unexpected. I felt compassion. And underneath that, I felt something else beginning to grow, something I did not understand yet. "What do we do now?" I asked quietly. Jong-in wiped his eyes and took a shaky breath. "I don't know," he admitted. "For the first time in 10 years, I have no plan, no power, and no answers. All I know is that I need to keep you safe until this is over. That's the least I can do after everything I've done wrong." We stood there in that small, shabby apartment as morning light filtered through the dirty windows. Outside, the city was waking up to a normal day. But for us, nothing would ever be normal again.
Living together in that tiny apartment was strange at first. Jong-in, who had commanded hundreds of people and controlled an empire, now spent his days pacing the small living room or staring out the window at the street below. He looked like a caged tiger, powerful but trapped, uncertain of what to do with himself. I tried to give him space, but the apartment was so small that we could not really avoid each other. I spent time in the bedroom, looking through the few books left on a dusty shelf, while Jong-in made phone calls in hushed voices, trying to figure out what remained of his organization and how dangerous the situation really was.
On the third day in the safe house, I decided I could not live like this anymore. Yes, I was a prisoner who had been freed. Yes, I was in danger. Yes, my entire life had been turned upside down. But sitting around feeling scared and helpless was not going to help anything. I needed to do something normal, something that reminded me of who I really was. I went into the kitchen and opened the cabinets. There was not much, just some rice, eggs, vegetables that were almost expired, and basic spices. It was not ideal, but I could work with it. I started cooking, chopping vegetables and heating up the small stove. The familiar motions calmed my racing thoughts. My hands knew what to do, even when my mind was confused. The smell of cooking food filled the apartment. I heard Jong-in's footsteps stop in the living room. A moment later, he appeared in the kitchen doorway, watching me with a puzzled expression. "What are you doing?" he asked. "Making dinner," I said simply, stirring the rice. "We both need to eat, and honestly, I needed to do something productive or I was going to lose my mind." Jong-in leaned against the door frame. "You don't have to cook for me. You're not my servant. You're someone I wronged terribly." I turned to look at him. "I know I don't have to. I want to. Cooking makes me feel like myself again, like I'm still Minjae the baker, not just a victim of kidnapping or a person hiding from criminals." Something softened in Jong-in's eyes. He came into the kitchen and sat at the small table, watching me work. "Can I help?" he asked quietly. I was surprised. "Do you know how to cook?" He laughed, but it was a sad sound. "No, I always had people who cooked for me, or I ate at expensive restaurants. I never learned how to do simple things like this." I handed him a cucumber and a knife. "Here, cut this into thin slices. Not too thin, not too thick, just medium."
Jong-in took the knife carefully, like he was handling something unfamiliar and potentially dangerous. He started cutting, his movements awkward and uncertain. The slices came out uneven, some thick, some thin, some crooked. He looked at his work with frustration. "This is harder than it looks," he muttered. I smiled, despite everything. "Everything is hard when you first try it, but you'll get better with practice." We worked together in comfortable silence after that. I guided him through simple tasks, and he followed my instructions with surprising focus and dedication. When the food was ready, we sat at the small table and ate together. It was nothing fancy, just rice with stir-fried vegetables and scrambled eggs, but it tasted good. More importantly, it felt normal. "This is nice," Jong-in said softly, looking down at his plate. "I can't remember the last time I had a meal that felt this peaceful." Over the following days, we fell into a routine. Jong-in spent mornings making phone calls and trying to manage what little remained of his connections. I discovered that while his main compound had been destroyed, not everything was lost. Some of his people had escaped and were hiding in different locations. But the Dragon Syndicate was actively hunting them down, and every day brought news of more losses. In the afternoons, we cooked together. I taught Jong-in how to chop vegetables properly, how to season food, how to tell when rice was perfectly cooked. He was a terrible student at first, burning things and cutting his fingers and making messes everywhere. But he never gave up. He kept trying, kept practicing, and slowly started to improve. In the evenings, we talked. Really talked. Not interrogations or defensive explanations like before, but real conversations about life, fears, and regrets. Jong-in told me about his childhood in more detail. He described growing up in violent poverty, watching his father beat his mother, going hungry for days at a time. He explained how he joined a gang when he was just 15 because it was the only way to survive. He climbed the ranks through intelligence and ruthlessness, eventually taking over and building his own organization. "I thought power would make me safe," he said one night, sitting on the worn couch with a cup of tea I had made for him. "I thought if I was strong enough, rich enough, feared enough, nobody could ever hurt me again. But the truth is, I was never safe. I was always looking over my shoulder, always waiting for betrayal.
always alone. I built a fortress around myself, but I was still just a scared, lonely kid inside. I sat next to him, listening carefully. "What would you do differently if you could go back?" I asked. Jong-in was quiet for a long time. "Everything," he finally said. "I would choose a different path entirely. Maybe I would have gotten a real job, something honest. Maybe I would have gone to school, learned a trade. Maybe I would have tried to build relationships based on trust instead of fear." He looked at me with intense, serious eyes. "Maybe I would have tried to be more like you."
You're kind, Minjae. Genuinely kind. You bandaged my hand when I was keeping you prisoner. You cook for me even though I destroyed your life. You talk to me like I'm a human being, not a monster. I don't understand how you can be this way after everything I've done to you, but I admire it more than anything I've ever admired before. I felt warmth spreading through my chest, mixed with confusion and something else I was afraid to name. I was angry at first, I admitted. I was terrified and furious, and I hated you. But then I got to know you, the real you, not the Mafia boss, but the person underneath, and I realized you're not a monster. You're just someone who made bad choices because you were hurting and scared. We all make mistakes, Jong-in. The important thing is what we do after we realize we were wrong. Jong-in reached out slowly and took my hand. His touch was gentle, uncertain, nothing like the powerful grip of the man who had kidnapped me weeks ago. "I want to be better," he whispered. "I want to change, but I don't know how." "Start by choosing differently today," I said softly, squeezing his hand. "And then tomorrow choose differently again. That's how change happens, one small choice at a time." That night was a turning point. Something shifted between us, something deep and powerful. The walls around Jong-in's heart started to crumble, and I found myself falling for this broken, complicated man who was trying so hard to become someone better. 2 weeks later, we received a phone call that changed everything. It was Subin. He had been working in secret with law enforcement, providing all the evidence he had about the Dragon Syndicate's illegal activities. The police had conducted massive raids across the city, arresting the gang's leadership and shutting down their operations. It was over. The Dragon Syndicate was finished. "It's safe now, Hyung," Subin said through the phone, his voice filled with relief and exhaustion. "I'm so sorry for everything. I'll spend the rest of my life making this up to you." I should have been happy. I should have immediately packed my things and run back to my normal life. But when I looked at Jong-in, sitting across the room and watching me with sad, resigned eyes, I felt my heart breaking. After I hung up, Jong-in stood up slowly. "You should go," he said quietly. "Go back to your cafe, your neighborhood, your real life. You've been trapped in my mess for too long. You deserve to be free." "What will you do?" I asked. Jong-in looked around the small apartment, then out the window at the city. "I'm leaving the criminal world completely. I'm officially stepping down from what's left of my organization and handing control to my second-in-command. I've arranged for protection for all my former associates who want to go legitimate. As for me, I'll figure something out. Maybe I'll leave the city, start over somewhere nobody knows my name." "Are you going to be alone?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He smiled sadly. "I've always been alone, Minjae. That's nothing new." I walked over to him and took both his hands in mine. "What if you didn't have to be alone anymore?" Jong-in's eyes widened. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that over these past weeks, I've seen who you really are. Not the Mafia boss, not the criminal, but the real person underneath. And that person is someone I care about. Someone I love." Tears spilled down Jong-in's cheeks. "How can you love me after what I did to you?" "Because you changed," I said firmly. "Because you recognized your mistakes and felt genuine remorse. Because you protected me when you could have just left me behind. Because you're trying so hard to be better. That's the person I love, Jong-in. Not who you were, but who you're becoming."
He pulled me into his arms and held me tight, his whole body shaking with emotion. "I don't deserve you," he whispered into my hair. "Maybe not," I agreed. "But I'm choosing to give you a chance anyway. We can build something new together, something honest and good, but only if that's what you want too." "More than anything," Jong-in said, pulling back to look into my eyes, "I want to build a life with you, a real life, not one based on crime and fear. I want to wake up next to you every morning. I want to learn how to bake cookies and make you laugh and be someone worthy of your love. Can you teach me how to do that?" I smiled through my own tears. "Yes, we'll figure it out together." 3 months later, I reopened Sunrise Bakery. Jong-in was with me, wearing an apron covered in flour, learning how to knead dough properly. He was terrible at it, getting flour everywhere and constantly asking questions, but he never stopped trying. My regular customers were surprised to see a new person working with me, but they welcomed Jong-in kindly, especially after tasting the chocolate chip cookies he had finally learned to make without burning. Subin came to visit often, bringing his new girlfriend and helping us with repairs around the shop. He and Jong-in had a long, difficult conversation where both of them apologized for their parts in the disaster. Subin was working with a legitimate tech company now, using his skills for good instead of crime. He had learned his lesson just like Jong-in had. Every evening, after closing the cafe, Jong-in and I would sit together in my small apartment above the shop. We would talk about our day, make dinner together, and plan for the future. Jong-in was learning how to be a regular person, someone who paid bills and did grocery shopping and worried about normal things like whether we had enough eggs for tomorrow's baking.
Sometimes he had nightmares about his old life. Sometimes he struggled with guilt over the things he had done. But every time he felt lost, I was there to remind him that the past did not define him. What mattered was who he chose to be today. One evening, about 6 months after we reopened the cafe, Jong-in and I were decorating cupcakes together. He was concentrating very hard on piping frosting roses, his tongue sticking out slightly in focus. I watched him with overwhelming affection. He looked up and caught me staring. "What?" he asked, smiling. "I was just thinking about how everything started," I said. "You kidnapped me because of a mistake. You lost everything you had spent 10 years building. Your whole world fell apart."